He called me intimidating and I took it as a compliment. Let that land for a second. Because the first time a man said it to me, he meant it as a warning. A soft insult wrapped in a nervous laugh. And I watched him expect me to shrink, to apologize, to soften my edges so he could feel taller. I didn't. I smiled. Slowly. Because what he was really saying was that my presence disrupted his comfort. That my certainty made his uncertainty loud. That my calm confidence exposed places he hadn't yet claimed inside himself. And that moment rewired me. I realized intimidation is not about aggression or coldness. It's about coherence. It's about a woman whose words, body language, boundaries, and standards all tell the same story. No leaks, no desperation, no performance, just alignment. Philosophers have said for centuries that people fear what they cannot control. And psychology confirms it when you don't seek approval, when you don't over-explain yourself, when your nervous system is regulated and grounded. You trigger something ancient in others. Some call it attraction. Some call it respect. Some call it intimidating. I call it power. I remember sitting across from him in a low-lit restaurant. Gold cutlery, soft jazz, the kind of place where women often try too hard to be palatable. I leaned back in my chair, took my time with my drink, listened more than I spoke. And when I did speak, my voice was steady, warm, unhurried. I didn't rush to impress him. I didn't audition for his interest. And when he finally said, "You're kind of intimidating," I knew exactly what he meant. He couldn't read me, couldn't predict me, couldn't place me beneath him. If you're new here, make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications. Because on Femphoria, we don't teach you how to be chosen. We teach you how to choose yourself so clearly that the right people rise and the wrong ones remove themselves. This is not about being harsh or masculine or unavailable. It's about being self-contained, about walking into a room like you belong there. Because you do. About understanding that the most magnetic women are not loud, not chasing, not explaining they are present. And presence is confronting to anyone who lives disconnected from themselves. Here's the truth most dating advice won't touch. When a man calls you intimidating, he's revealing his relationship with his own power. A secure man feels intrigued. An insecure one feels threatened. That distinction will save you years of confusion if you let it. I've watched women twist themselves into knots trying to seem easy. Low maintenance. Not too much. As if attraction is something fragile that must be handled gently. When in reality desire grows in the presence of strength. Jung talked about the shadowed parts of ourselves we haven't integrated when you stand fully in who you are. You mirror that shadow back to others. Some will rise to meet it. Some will run. Neither is your problem. Intimidation is often just unspoken admiration mixed with fear. Fear of not measuring up. Fear of being seen. Fear of being required to grow. And this is where your feminine intelligence comes in. You don't argue with his label. You don't rush to reassure him. You let it sit. Silence. Again. Doing the work. Because when you try to convince someone you're not intimidating, you're really saying you're willing to be smaller for their comfort. And that is the fastest way to lose respect your own and theirs. I've had men circle back months later, sometimes years, admitting they weren't ready for me then. Not because I was cruel or unavailable, but because I was clear. I had standards I didn't negotiate. I had a life that didn't pause. I didn't chase chemistry. I evaluated consistency. Psychology tells us that humans attach more deeply to what they invest effort into. When you don't overgive, when you don't overfunction, you allow him to step forward or step away. Either outcome is clarity, and clarity is luxury. If this is hitting, I want you to comment your biggest takeaway, because naming it anchors it. And notice how this isn't about tactics or lines or tricks. It's about identity. When you respect your own time, energy, and boundaries, others feel the weight of that respect. They may call it intimidating, but what they are really feeling is the absence of access without effort. So let me leave you with this, because this is where everything integrates. Intimidation is the side effect of self-trust. When you trust yourself, You stop outsourcing your worth. You don't chase reassurance. You don't rush intimacy. You don't overextend to be liked. You let your standards speak for you. You let your absence teach lessons your presence no longer needs to explain. And that kind of woman changes rooms. Not because she dominates, but because she's anchored. The Stoics believed that true power is the ability to remain unmoved by what seeks to provoke you. And that is exactly what feminine authority looks like in real life. Calm, selective, unbothered. When he calls you intimidating, hear the subtext. Hear what's being revealed. Then decide, does this man feel inspired to rise? Or relieved to retreat? Both answers are information. Neither requires you to change. If this video shifted something in you, if you felt that quiet confidence settle in your body, subscribe, turn on notifications, and come back to this whenever you feel tempted to dilute yourself. Rewatch it when you're told you're too much. Comment, "I needed this," if it reminded you that your power was never the problem. Because the right people aren't intimidated by a woman who knows who she is. They are magnetized. And the rest, they were never meant to sit at your table anyway. And let me stretch this truth just a little further so it settles into your bones. Because intimidation is not something you turn on. It's something that appears when you stop negotiating with yourself. The moment you no longer rush to prove warmth, availability, or likability, your energy sharpens. Not cold, clear, and clarity feels dangerous to people who survive on ambiguity. When you say no without drama, when you take your time responding because your life is full, when you don't flinch at someone else's discomfort, you create a psychological mirror. Men sense it instantly. Some lean in, curious, activated, wanting to earn space beside you. Others feel exposed, as if your stillness is asking questions they can't answer yet. That's when the word intimidating appears. And I want you to understand this deeply. Intimidation is often the sound of someone meeting their own ceiling. You didn't do anything wrong. You simply refused to lower yourself to keep the interaction comfortable. A woman who knows she will be okay with or without a man radiates inevitability. There's no panic in her choices, no urgency in her voice, no bargaining in her boundaries. And that calm certainty rearranges power dynamics without her ever raising her voice. This is why you don't correct the label. You don't soften it. You don't laugh it off. You let it stand, because it tells you everything you need to know about where he is in his growth. The right man doesn't ask you to be less. He adjusts, rises, steadies himself, because your presence makes him want to become more. And if he doesn't, you don't argue with reality. You walk away whole. If this expanded something in you, comment, "I needed this so it anchors." Subscribe so you stay in rooms where your power is reflected back to you. And remember this every time you're tempted to dim your light. You were never intimidating. You were simply undeniable. And understand this, because this is where most women finally stop doubting themselves. Intimidation is not created by attitude. It's created by integrity. When your inner world and outer behavior finally match, you stop leaking energy. You stop smiling when something feels off. You stop explaining why your standards exist. You stop negotiating attraction. And that coherence makes people uncomfortable who rely on charm, confusion, or control to feel powerful. A woman who is rooted does not need to dominate a room. The room recalibrates around her. Her stillness speaks louder than noise. Her boundaries do not ask permission. She doesn't threaten. She doesn't warn. She doesn't announce her value. She simply moves as if it's already assumed. That's when the word intimidating appears again. Not because she's harsh, but because she's no longer available for nonsense. And this is where the final shift happens. You stop asking, "How do I seem?" and start asking, "How do I feel?" Calm, aligned, clear. If the answer is yes, you're doing it right. Anyone who feels challenged by that was never meant to stay comfortable around you. And that's not arrogance. That's discernment. Power doesn't shout. Power doesn't chase. Power doesn't convince. It chooses. So the next time you're labeled intimidating, don't rush to soften it. Let it echo. Let it sort people for you. Because the woman who owns herself doesn't need to be understood by every only respected by the right ones.